Whatever thou mightest have been profited by me, and thus you dishonor your parents. Corban is just simply a way of saying, I took the money that I had set aside to take care of mom and dad in their old age, and I gave it as a gift to the temple. So, mom and dad, you're on your own. What have you done? You've dishonored your parents. You've dishonored them. That's not talking about children listening to mom and dad when they're little. This is talking about an adult child. The progeny of a mom and dad who's now an adult, a responsible adult, and should know better than to do such a thing, right? If we take care of mom and dad in their aging years, that pleases Jehovah God. The scriptures bear that out. That's very displeasing to God, to take a commandment like that and then to twist it so that there is a legal loophole around doing what God said to do. Jesus was very upset with them for that. Really pointed that out to them and hammered that point home. You've made the law of God of no effect by your traditions, your rabbinic traditions. Gene? That's probably wise, yes. There are times I say things, and there are times I kind of withhold because I also realize that I have three boys, and they'll always be, in my mind, they'll always be boys. But they're not boys, are they, Dave? Dave's got me beat. They get to a point where they're not boys anymore. Now, they may always be boys in your mind, but they're men. They're young adults now, and then they're making decisions. And, you can help them out. You can give them some advice, especially if they want it. Sometimes they want it, sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, let's just be honest. When they're little, you kind of rode herd on them, didn't you? You had to. They needed a lot of guidance then. But now, if you did your job right, they shouldn't need that much guidance now, because they learned what they ought to be doing, how they ought to live.
I remember one time that Danny was going to college, and he was with another young man, and I happened to wake up when he come in the house. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I said, "Are you, we're planning." I said, "Maybe it's too late to go out." Okay, Mom. Now then, I didn't.
Right.
He could have said, "Mom, I'm in college now."
Mm-hmm.
But he was okay.
Right. Well, I even had that discussion with mine coming home. And I said, well, we stay up to all hours down there at the college. Okay. 2 o'clock in the morning, you come rolling in, you wake Mom and me up. I'm not happy. All right. You be in here by 11 o'clock in the morning and waking me up? No, that's not going to happen. And we had to sit down and we had to discuss that. Did they like that? No. We had some words. But that's what you do, right? We understand that. Now, as far as honoring your parents, it doesn't mean that everything they tell you to do, you say you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s even, and you're still fortunate enough to have your parents, and they say, oh, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Yeah, okay, Dad. You know what I'm talking about. It's gotten to that point now that will you listen? Yes. Will you take the advice? Well, you'll listen to it. Not necessarily will you take it. Will you do it? But you still honor Mom and Dad, don't you? You still respect them and you still love them. You take care of them. And that's what Jesus was pointing out there. You don't take that gift or don't take what you had set aside to help them, put that into the treasury and say, I'm done. I washed my hands of it. You're on your own, Mom and Dad. You figure it out. I'm not taking care of you. You don't have to. I'm not obligated to take care of you anymore. I found a loophole in God's law. God does not look kindly on that, by the way. Don't look for loopholes. Look to please God. And it pleases God when you take care of your parents. Okay? So it's very important. That's a commandment that is repeated word for word in the New Testament. So it's definitely a part of Christianity. Now, verse 13, very short. Thou shalt not kill. You think, okay, that's easy. It's easy to understand. Unfortunately, the King James translators didn't get it specific enough. Do you know I've had people use this verse to try to discourage me from going hunting? God said, thou shalt not kill. What are you doing when you go in the woods? When you aim a rifle at a deer and you shoot and kill the deer, what have you just done? You killed. Really? Really? Did I violate that commandment? Of course not. That's not what it's talking about. That's not what it's talking about at all. Dave, you had a comment before we move on. Mm-hmm. 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 Life comes from life. It's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. But as far as killing goes, all right. So he's talking about human life, right? No doubt that's what he's referring to. But killing in every situation, is that what it's saying here? Okay, let's skip ahead. Let's go to chapter 21, just real briefly here. Verse 12. He that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. We're only one chapter ahead here. God just said, thou shalt not kill, but if a man smites a man, hits a man so that he dies, he shall surely be put to death. What's that saying? Somebody's got to put him to death. Is that capital punishment? I've had that verse thrown up to me too. Say, well, you believe in capital punishment? You want? Yeah, I'll give you my opinion. Yes, I do believe in it. All right, why? Because I believe it's a good deterrent.
I wonder if they have a child killed or a loved one killed, would it be the same way?
Yeah, exactly. There should be capital punishment. And you say, well, that's Old Testament. You just said there in chapter 21 of the Exodus is Old Testament. What about Romans 14? There's some New Testament for you. We're not to really, as Christians, we're to fear and obey the laws of men too, aren't we? And he says, and you have nothing to fear from the magistrates and the judges if you're living a good, righteous life. But if you do evil, then fear, because he beareth not the sword in vain. This is talking about the governing powers, bearing not the sword in vain. What does that mean? What do the governing authorities under the law of God, under the New Testament, have the right to do? Maintain order and peace and execute capital punishment on criminals, people who have broken the law to that extent. So a better wording for chapter 20 rather, in verse 13, would be, thou shalt do no murder. Thou shalt not commit murder. That's what that's referring to. And yes, it is referring to the sanctity of human life. There's no doubt about that. Human life should not be taken just arbitrarily without any remorse or any consequences, no matter what it is. Even if it's self-defense, and it may be justifiable, it's still regrettable. We don't want to take human life. That's not what we set out to do. That's not our goal. Now, we may defend ourselves. How about going to war? Was Israel ever commanded to go to war and kill their enemies? Absolutely they did. So this is not applying to this verse here, saying when he says thou shalt not kill, he is saying that you're not to harbor the feelings that are going to lead you to murder somebody. You're not to murder anyone. And Jesus carries it even further, doesn't he, in the Sermon on the Mount? He says, you've heard that it hath been said by them of old, thou shalt not kill. But I say unto you what? Don't be angry with your brother without a cause. Don't hate him. You know, and if you hate your brother, you've already committed a murder, really, inside. In fact, John even says the same thing. He that hateth his brother is a murderer, and no murderer can have eternal life dwelling in him. So we can't have hatred then, can we? Can't have that. So the idea of committing murder, that's what is being referred to here. Murder is committed on a variety of levels too. How about the abortion that goes on today? I don't either. And then, politics. And it is an election year, all right? Politics aside, I don't care what political party we're talking about. If somebody says they're pro-life, okay, that's usually the way I go. I'm going to vote pro-life. I'll give you that right now. And there is a party that's a lot more pro-life than the other one is. That's all I'm saying. So if you want to know which way I go, you probably got a pretty good idea. However, either party, whatever one that says they're pro-life, be careful. Because they're not really as pro-life as what they might be saying. Gotta check it out. And I'm going to tell you something. This may disturb you. You may not agree with me. I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I'm against abortion, the politician will say, except in the case of rape. Now, I want you to think about this for one moment. Just for a moment. Just think about it. Whether or not you agree with me, that's fine, but listen to it. The rapist has rights to a fair trial, doesn't he? And due process. He has rights. The woman has rights. She needs to be taken care of. Agreed? The baby has no rights at all. It should just be terminated because it was a rape. Do you see a miscarriage there of justice? The baby didn't do anything wrong. No, nothing wrong. And it's a life. Careful, be careful. Be careful. I understand the thinking. I realize that. I understand the hurt feelings. I understand all of that. Sorry. But the situation, as bad as it is, doesn't get better by making another mistake. Okay? Just think it through. Think about it. Just for a moment. Just mull it over. Whether you agree with me or not, that's fine. That's up to you. But think about it. Think about it. Pro-life, someone says, I'm pro-life, doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely in compliance with what God says in His Word. Dave? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. That's another life. That's another human soul. That's another person that, that could live eternally with his Lord in heaven. We're going to just terminate that? Think about it. Think about it. You don't solve one bad situation by another bad action. You can't solve a rape with a murder. Don't pile another. Don't do overcome evil with evil. Overcome evil with good. That's where we're at on that. Well, I believe that's true. Alabama, yes. Yes. Mm. Right. And they didn't have that back then. No. No. There wasn't any kind of abortion at all available. And then when it was discovered that you could do that, and the archaic methods it was, right. And that's of course what the other, the pro-choice people will say is, well, back in the days of when it first started, it was a horrible procedure that resulted in a lot of pain and discomfort and maybe the death of the mother trying to have the abortion too. But we've come a long way now. It's cleaner, it's more efficient, it's less trauma, and still murder. Sorry, you're still taking a life. Still taking a life. I was told one time that I needed to keep my hands off of women's bodies. Yeah. Okay. I'm telling you that. I was very uncomfortable when that was said to me. All right. You keep your hands off of our bodies. And I was quick enough to say this. Agreed. You keep your hands off the unborn baby. All right. Now, what was being said. That's trying to make me uncomfortable. It's trying to make you uncomfortable. Keep your hands off our bodies. Okay. Agreed. We're not touching you. You keep your hands off of the unborn. They have rights too. That's a life. That's a life. Murder, committing murder, is showing us the value of human life in God's eyes. We talk about Black Lives Matter or White Lives Matter. God looks down and says all lives matter. All right? That simple. It's that simple. All right? And I know for some reason that's offensive when I say all lives matter. I don't know why. I guess it's because people are against God. Because I'm just saying what God's saying by this very verse here. Life matters. All life. So we don't take life just arbitrarily. You don't just kill somebody and then walk away from it and forget about it. That's a very serious offense. So thou shalt not murder. You're not to commit murder. Lynette? Sure they are. Sure. 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 Absolutely. How do I know you're feeling pain? You'll let us know. You have a central nervous system, don't you? And it reacts to different kinds of stimuli, sometimes very painfully. We know that. Guess who else has a central nervous system? Now you might say, well, early on they don't. Well, it's beginning to develop from the very beginning. And by the time a person gets to know, they say, well, no doubt, she's pregnant. Okay, they know this. By that time, it's the very first thing that's noticeable. You see the cranial part of it and you see the spinal cord coming down. That's the brain and the spinal cord. That's a central nervous system, folks. Yeah, and they do experience pain. They do. Exactly. That's just a natural reaction. That's a natural reaction. Even fish, if you grab a fish, it's going to wiggle away from you. Anything, any kind of living thing is going to try to avoid that. All right. So this is the idea. Life is precious in the sight of God. We need to regard it the same way God does. All lives. All lives. And I'm not being racist there. I'm saying all. But, okay, if you want to call me racist, here it is. There's one race. There's only one. It's a human race. God created a one blood, all the races of men. All right? Look at that in Acts chapter 17. One blood. We're all the same. And it doesn't matter what color your skin is or my skin is. And if you get into an automobile accident and you need a pint of blood, if we're compatible, and there are some different types, but chances are I'm a type O, and if you're a type O or A, I think O can give to A too. All right, O positive is a universal kind of, or one of them. Anyway, I'm O positive. So if anyone needs any blood, here I am. All right. And it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter. Does that tell you something? God made of one blood the human race. That's it. So we have some different variety within the race, within the species of humanity. Okay, different heights, different builds, different colors of skin, different facial features, different. So what? So what? We're all human beings. And we all matter to God. Thou shalt not commit murder. God values human life very highly. We need to value that as well. Gene? Yeah. Well, you talk about inconsistency. If a woman decides she wants to have an abortion, that's fine. But if a woman's pregnant and she is murdered, it's called a double homicide. That's inconsistent. Well, I don't know. It's just, they don't. It's inconsistent. Because you're saying two people were killed here, but yet if a woman decides or chooses to have an abortion, there is no murder. It's just, that was her choice. She terminated the pregnancy. Think about it, folks, please. Please think about it long and hard. It's a very serious issue still today. Roe versus Wade being overturned was a wonderful thing. It's a good step in the right direction, but we still have that problem. It's still going on, still bad. 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. This is a real problem. Committing adultery, unfaithfulness, marital unfaithfulness. What is adultery? Okay, there's two ways. There's two ways. You can either be unfaithful to your spouse with somebody else, or you can have relationships with somebody else's spouse. That's two ways you can be an adulterer or adulteress. Okay? The scriptures tell you both ways is adultery, both ways is evil in the sight of God. All right? And adultery is, a lot of people will refer to what Jesus said, that if you look after a woman to lust after, you've committed adultery in your heart. It's a serious offense. It is sin. Is it literally adultery? No. No. Committing adultery and having adultery in your heart is like saying that, okay, I'm angry with my brother, so I've killed him. So I need to go to jail, or I need to be put to death for that. No. You're on the way to committing a murder if you're not careful. All right, be careful with that. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Get it straightened out. But the same thing is true as far as adultery is concerned. Adultery is a physical act. And here he says, thou shalt not commit adultery. You be faithful to your spouse. That's the way it has to be. We are out of time, folks. We'll pick up there, Lord willing, on Wednesday evening, and hopefully we'll get the rest of the chapter covered. That's why I wanted to start this when I did.